I woke up one morning with the intention of doing some work in my backyard. I've actually been doing a lot more work in the yard than usual ever since the quarantine. Gotta stay productive and tackle some of these neglected projects before it gets too hot. Living here in Arizona, it can be 60 degrees for the high one day, and then tomorrow it's 100 degrees. In any case, I've had some extra time on my hands, and it's been fun. I kind of enjoy pruning my trees and bushes. I like to think it's doing bonsai, and I find it very therapeutic for me. Plus, it reminds me of my dad, who just loved doing bonsai too. When I finished my projects for the day, I was putting some of my tools back and noticed that my tool chest is kind of a mess. My toolbox had become a catch-all with different parts and tools from other projects from the past. As I was sorting through all this clutter, I came across 3 spikes that were loose on the bottom of one of the trays. I wasn't sure why I had bought 3 spikes and what I would have used them for. What could 3 spikes be used for? As soon as I asked myself that question, I knew exactly what 3 spikes were used for. They were used to nail Jesus to the cross. I've read the gospel accounts of Christ's crucifixion and learned from other resources just how brutal this was. According to Roman practices at that time, a large spike was driven through both of Jesus' feet, and a spike was driven through each wrist. To make the suffering worse, his legs were broken so to suffocate him, as he would not be able to push up on his legs to breathe. I just can't imagine the level of pain and suffering that Christ endured on the cross. As I held these 3 spikes and thinking about Christ's crucifixion, I picked up a hammer and I found a piece of scrap wood. I wanted to drive these spikes into the wood to remind me of what he did for me on the cross. Now, these spikes I had must have paled in comparison to the spikes that nailed him to the cross. I took the first spike and I drove it into the wood. It wasn't that easy. It definitely required a lot more force and repeated blows to drive it through the wood. As I swung the hammer, I kept thinking about God's love for me. He loved me so much that he would sacrifice his very own son on my behalf to atone for my sins. I never thought I ever deserved to be loved, but God loved me unconditionally. I took the second spike and nailed it into the wood. It reminded me of his amazing grace. I didn't deserve his sacrifice. I've always thought of myself as a failure and undeserving, but God saw so much more. I drove the final spike and it reaffirmed that I am forgiven. All my sins in the past, the present, and in the future have, are, and will be forever forgiven. As I looked at these 3 spikes nailed into this piece of wood, one final thing came to mind. They were Jesus' final words before he died. He said, "It is finished." I never really understood why Good Friday was called Good Friday. Well, now I do. I hope we all take the time to reflect and thank God for his incredible sacrifice.